Yeah.
Well, so I'm here with Mike Mullins. We haven't seen each other in many years, probably 10 or 15, at least for more than a few minutes here and there, you know. And we're just going to sort of go over. I've known Mike since I was about 12 or 13 years old. We're just going to reminisce. And I just grabbed his guitar.
Right.
Because it's really cool. Tell me about this thing, man.
This guitar is a Martin D18. It's 1943, and it's undergone a few changes. But I've had this guitar. It's been my primary guitar since 1976, back when they were affordable. Now these guitars have kind of skyrocketed and become very collectible. At the time, it was just kind of a beater guitar that was laying around a music store in Palo Alto called Griffin Stringed Instruments, and it's a fantastic sounding guitar. But I've played it. I've had other instruments over the years, but this is the one I've kept the longest. I mean, 34 years starting next year. So I'll probably never part with it.
I know.
It's not that I could probably afford another one, but it's been a lot of the recordings I've done, and sometimes I put it away and played other guitars, but I always end up, going back to this one. So this is kind of my old standby.
Yeah.
And it's
God, that tone was just amazing. I mean, I just heard you playing this a second ago. Yeah.
Pretty happy with this guy.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, so one thing is, I mean, they don't build guitars. You can't really build a new guitar that's going to sound like this. The guitar's 60 years old.
The way guitars are built now, the wood's not as dried out and aged, and generally they use hide glue. On some of the upper end Martins now, they're using hide glue and trying to construct them faithfully like they did in the 1930s.
So what was the advantage to that, to hide glue?
I'm not.
Or it's just what they were using back then?
It's what they were using back then, and the later glues apparently, from what I've heard, the purists really like the hide glue because it sort of integrates with the wood a little better. It just allows it to vibrate a little more freely. It's just anything that's more of a natural substance rather than a synthetic.
Yeah. So at some point they changed from that into what was the next? Any idea?
The glues that they use now they're just more modern, a more modern chemical composition, of which I'm not sure of the exact nature of it. But I don't believe Martin's used hide glue for the last 30 or 40 years at least. But these guitars have what are called scallop bracing on the top. Now they've used that again, but Martin abandoned it in the 1940s. But these guitars have the braces, how do I describe this? They come to peaks when they're on the inside of the top. Of course, I can't show you, but instead of being all one
like
thickness,
a bar,
they at the stress points they kind of form a little peak, and then they're thinner, so that there's just much freer vibration. This guitar is very lightly constructed, but surprisingly, there's almost no bulge at the top, where there's a constant, almost 200 pounds of tension. I use medium gauge strings, folks. These aren't lights. These are,
which drives the guitar a lot better.
Yes, it does. I've tried lights on this, and for what I do, they just don't. They don't really. I have to compete with a mandolin and sometimes a banjo or a loud fiddle, and even when you're amplified using light strings, they tend to just buzz more, and they just don't. You don't quite get this.
And mediums, as long as it's set up properly for mediums, you don't even really notice it's harder to play.
It's pretty easy to play. You know, if you're used to lights or extra lights, you kind of go, ow, you can't bend these or whatever. But I don't really bend strings that much. My experiments at bending strings have always, I don't know how players bend strings and their guitar stays in tune. This guitar doesn't really like it. It'll throw it off. Go, what are you doing? I'm old.
I think I was just playing with my son Corey the other night, and she might have been playing something like "Wish You Were Here," the Pink Floyd tune. Well, David Gilmour plays, of course, with a plain third string and can bend that note a whole step, no problem. And so, but with my mediums and a 17 or what is it on that? No, it's like a 26 or something. On the third string. Is that what it is for medium?
It's a 26. On
this 26. Bending that a whole step at the 4th fret. If you do the guitar, the string will go out of tune or break or something. Anyway, it just doesn't happen.
But But yeah, I also have a guitar called a Collings. They're made in Austin,
yeah.
Texas, and
Yeah.
that's a great sounding guitar. And it's basically kind of a replica of this. This is a D18. The D18s are, they generally, in a lot of times, people think that they're a smaller guitar than a D28, which is sort of the most famous Martin Dreadnought.
Right.
People have this impression of, well, they're a little smaller than a D. No, they're the same size. They're exactly the same size. Just the differences are, this guitar is mahogany back and sides, and it's a plainer as far as its ornamentation. The D28s have white binding, and very often a herringbone strip around the top, and rosewood back and sides. Rosewood has a little deeper, darker tone with maybe a little more complex sound. But the 18s have a very immediate, punchy, balanced, with a lot of kind of higher overtones, and a lot of players prefer them. I personally, I just happen to have a D18. I love D28s also. I've had a couple of very nice ones. I don't currently have one right now, but my son has one. He's got a...
Oh, he got yours?
Well, no, he actually got Ted Stancliffe's old D28.
Oh,
It's
really?
a long story, but yeah, it's one that I
We'll have to
helped.
go into the Ted Stancliffe story a little bit later. It'll be part of the next...
But basically, I think the mahogany guitars, especially from this era, are on par with the rosewood. They're just a little different sound.
Yeah.
It's there's players who prefer to me it's just what sounds good. If it sounds good to you, it doesn't really matter what it's made of. It's just people who are into brownie points tend to single out the D28s because they're rarer, they're more valuable to a collector.
Typically a little more expensive, but
typically more expensive, but
it's really apples and oranges.
It is, and some people, a player can tell the difference, but if you listen to a recording, it could be a really nice sounding D18 on there. You just don't know for sure. There's an interesting record put out by my friend David Grissman called Tone Poems.
Oh yeah.
He and Tony Rice, who's like one of the premier flat pickers, if not the, I mean, they both have excellent tone on their instruments. They're extremely, they're high. The level of their musicianship is fantastic. But not only that, they produce probably incredibly great tone. They just have their technique they use when they play is just. They can take instruments and even a rather relatively inexpensive instrument, make it sound fantastic. So Tone Poems, they played 17 different songs. This came out about 15 years ago. I recommend it if you're at all into vintage instruments and North American fretted instruments, guitars and mandolins, because they each play 17 different instruments. Tony plays 17 different guitars, and David plays 17 different mandolins. And some of the guitars are very high end. Like at one point, Dave will play his Gibson Lloyd Loar F5 from 1923, and Tony will play a 1939 Martin D45, of which there were only 91 D45s made, and if you find one for sale, they're generally around $200,000 these days. But they'll play something like that, and then on the next tune, they might play something relatively inexpensive, like almost not a Sears Roebuck, but they play this
Montgomery Ward thing or something.
pretty much.
Yeah.
They have a couple I don't know. David plays this mandolin called, I think it's an S.S. Stewart Snow Queen, and it's kind of a monstrosity.
Yeah.
It's just this. It's all covered with mother of toilet seat, and it's the headstock. It's very gaudy, and it wasn't an expensive instrument. It's designed to look flashy, yet. And then Tony plays a very inexpensive guitar. I forget who made it, but it's got like. The rosette has like dice, around it, and it's black. The whole thing is just jet black, and it's probably from the 30s or 40s, and yet somehow with their technique, they make these cheap instruments sound really, really good. Yeah. So it's an interesting project. I'm kind of rambling about it, but it just goes to show where it's kind of sometimes, if you're not in a position to get something like this, you can get, it's kind of like the. It's the car. It's the driver more than the car.
Yeah.
So you can have a relatively, inexpensive instrument, but if you have a good technique and a good foundation, you make it sound pretty good.
Yeah. I think one thing that is really important too, and that both of those guys have, is a level of musicianship and sense of rhythm to where they're never going to play a note like at the wrong time. which you hear that and you think, oh, that doesn't sound very good because they keep missing notes or something.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
because it's so crisply in time and tune and everything, it's going to sound great even if the again, the quality of the instrument is a little suspect.
Well, yeah.
So, but you hear a student hacking away and going do 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 do, and say, what a lousy instrument. No, it's a lousy driver.
Yeah, or somebody's playing an old guitar with a really thin Fender thin or something, and
and all you hear is
and all you hear is pick noise, and
Yeah.
God, these things aren't really that great, like.
Yeah.